This episode of The Inspiration Show is incredibly special. I get to leave the light on once again with one of my favorite people and performers. The incredible Alex Benoit is joining me today. Alex's story is beyond inspiring and is truly like no other because he went from elite ice dancing to the bright lights of Broadway. Alex has had such a meaningful impact on my life and my theater journey. Thank you so much for being here. I have so much love and admiration for you, and it's such an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here and glad to get to chat a little bit about all the beautiful serendipitous moments that brought me to this place.
I'm so excited. So, your journey began as a competitive ice dancer, and you then went on to represent Team USA. So, you competed internationally and finished fourth place in the US National Figure Skating Championships. So, when did you first discover ice dancing, and what was it about the sport that really drew you in and made you want to pursue it?
Growing up, we chatted a little bit about this a moment ago, but I have a lot of Canadian family members, and so growing up, there was kind of naturally a lot of people on the ice in my family. And so by the time that I was 3 or 4, I was already in hockey skates, learning how to play hockey, doing all that. I had two older brothers. The middle one touched the ice, but it wasn't really his thing. But the oldest one, I'm the youngest. The oldest one, he had already been playing hockey, and so I started playing hockey. And then through the course of my journey, I kind of figured out my mom had been a figure skater on Team USA in the 80s, and she became a judge. And I remember watching her judging the national championships. Gosh, it must have been in like 2003-ish. Um, and I remember seeing her and being like, well, that looks like an easy way to get on TV. And so I think the writing was on the wall that I really belonged performing in the way that I am now. But at the time, I saw that and I said, "Hey, this is what I should give a try." And so yeah, when I was 8 years old, I started figure skating, and it started out just kind of small. My mom would, instead of eating lunch at school, she would pick me up and take me to the rink, and we'd skate for an hour, and then I'd go back to school. And yeah, I kind of just figured out that it was something pretty early on, like I said, around 8, that I figured out it was intriguing to me. It felt, I think, looking back now, I identify that there was a certain degree of performance with it that really appealed to me. And I do also like sports. And so I think that, uh, there's a little bit of the sporting, but I think mostly it was the idea of getting to perform. I remember vividly, even at that young age, I would be out on the ice with my mom, and we knew that we'd become friendly with the guy who owned the rink, and he kind of came and went every so often. And so whenever he would be there, and it was a pretty empty rink, and so it was just me on the ice with my mom, and she'd put on music and just kind of let me improvise, and it's kind of like now if I get to improvise a scene, you build something out, and it's really a pleasure to kind of just explore what the creativity means to you. And I remember specifically the moments when he would come into the rink because suddenly I had an audience to perform for. And so I remember that quite vividly. But along the course of my journey with that, I started to take supplementary lessons, supplementary skills. So, I started skating when I was about 8, and by the time I was 9 or 10 is when I started taking things like ballet and jazz and all of these different forms of dance to supplement my skills on the ice. Um, and it was through that I actually ended up discovering theater in earnest. The School of Performing Arts, where I was taking ballet and jazz and eventually, modern and ballroom and all that stuff. Um, they had a summer camp called Camp Summer Stock. And it was all about, and I had some really wonderful directors and teachers there that have remained in my life as a wonderful support system. And I, couldn't have made the moves that I've had to make without their early inspiration to me. But I do this Camp Summer Stock, which is about, I think it's like a month long camp or so, 3 weeks to a month. And you basically, they write a show and they'll take, songs from the musical theater canon, all the way back through the golden age and even earlier and all the way up to what had recently come out at the time, which at the time that would have been like 2010, 2011. And they would write a show. And it would be probably I don't remember exactly, probably 45 to an hour long show. And I remember getting into that, and it just spoke to me. I was like, oh, this is great. I'd kind of been doing like choir on the side, because I was the youngest child, and when my mom wanted to put the middle son into choir, I came along and naturally had to do everything my older brothers did. And so I'd been doing choir, and so I was singing already, very recreationally, just on the side as kind of like a fun after school activity. But getting to go out there and sing and act and make people laugh and, explore all this stuff in a group setting really, really spoke to me. And yeah, so that was kind of my initial intro to that through skating. And so skating continued to remain in my life. And it was still the primary focus for a long time. So if I started in, 2003 or so when I was 8, I continued skating all the way up until I was 22. So 14 years, the next 14 years were pretty much skating was the focus and everything else. And I, early on, especially, I did, again, I'm the youngest child, so I had to do everything. And so I was playing baseball and football and lacrosse and anything you could imagine. And, once we got older, my brothers were really into cars. And so I started, um, for a while, I was doing like amateur racing. And so I would go and I was doing these racing events on the weekends where I would, be timed through these courses and stuff. So I love driving. So if anyone's listening to this that wants to put me in a movie where I have to do my own stunts, happy to. Or riding motorcycles, all that stuff. I was doing everything, but skating was my focus. And I got through when I was younger, I was a single skater and I'd been nationally ranked. It's like third place in the country at the younger levels in singles. And then around the time that I was 15, I was starting to work on my, like triple axel and then my quads. And I ended up injuring myself and realizing that this injury wasn't something that was going to change, even with surgery. It was something that I was born with, where my knees are just kind of weird. My right kneecap is in 3 pieces, and my left one is in 7. It just never turned into one solid piece, and so I have these weird fragments of bone in my knee that when I ended up doing these quads, I was over rotating. I was turning too much, and pulling on the web of scar tissue that holds my knee together. And I ended up tearing the scar tissue, and my knee starts floating around, swells up, and I go to the doctor. And my favorite story is whenever I tell people that, I'm 15 years old and I go to the doctor and I get my x-rays and MRI and stuff. And they walk into the room, and it's bad when the doctor walks in and says, okay, don't freak out, but your knee is going to look like it's shattered. Um, but yeah, that was, 15 years old or so was when I kind of realized, okay, what is my life now? For the first time, I think throughout our lives, there are chapters. And this was kind of the first time I remember really hitting a chapter where I'm like, what do I do? My whole thing has been single skating. What do I do from here? And at this point in my life, the answer that became clear was this is a transition from singles to ice dance, which I had always kind of wanted to do. My mom had been an ice dancer, and a lot of my people that I looked up to were ice dancers. Ice dance gets to kind of focus in on things like the footwork and the skating skills and partner work and lifts. And the thing that really touched me is that they really, really focus in on building a story, right? And so, again, young Alex didn't realize it, but old Alex says, well, I just wanted to act. At the time, I didn't realize that. And so I transitioned into ice dance. And it was kind of a natural, like, okay, this is around when I would want to be doing this anyways. I had just kind of hit a growth spurt. And so I was, getting around. At this point, I'm like 6'2", but at the time I was like 6 foot and started to fill out a little more where doing some of these lifts made more sense for me. And so, yeah, I transitioned into that and had a couple years where I was kind of like figuring it out because I was also still nursing the injury back to health. And so I didn't really go full out until I was like 18. And I went from thinking my whole plan was like, okay, I'm going to stay. I'm born and raised in the Chicagoland area, like 45 minutes outside of Chicago. Love Chicago. If anyone who's listening is from Chicago, it's a beautiful city. It's got great acting and it's a great place to start your career. Um, but
Mm.
I thought I was going to be living in Chicago. And then within the course of a week, I went from thinking that I was the skating partner I'd been skating with at the time, who I'd been paired with, decided she wanted to do school full time. And so basically overnight, it went from I'm my next, at least year, I'm living in Chicago and like taking a gap year or, taking classes at the community college on the side so I can focus on skating, to I had been paired up with a new partner. I had moved full time to the coach I'd been kind of like, I would like drive out once or twice a month to work with this guy. It's like the Olympic Training Center for Ice Dance in Michigan. So I'm new partner. I've moved out there. I'm living on my own for the first time in my life. I have this coach who I'd sort of been working with, but now is my full time coach. And my whole life is ice dance. Um, and yeah, from there, started that first season was kind of like you hit the ground running. You don't know what's going to happen. And I hadn't really been full force in ice dance at that point. I was kind of like dabbling in it. I was figuring out what it was. And this year was like, nope, you're doing this full on. You're at the rink all day, every day. And then you go home and you're so exhausted that you just lay on the couch and fall asleep, um, and try and get yourself some protein. But yeah, that first year things went really well, and as a team we kind of just like started to mesh really quickly, and so we were thrilled that we were at the junior level, which is kind of like the level right before the Olympic level, and we were third in the country, and then we got sent to Worlds, and we were getting sent overseas. We were representing Team USA. This is all new for me. My partner, my skating partner, she had already represented Team USA with a prior partner, but this was all new for me. And so suddenly now I'm a kid who's, I've gone to Canada, I've visited family in Toronto, but I've never gone overseas. And suddenly I'm competing in Japan and I'm competing in, oh, where else did I go that first year? I was in like Croatia and I was in Hungary and, just all over the place, and it was just entirely new for me, and I was so fortunate to have people who could support me who had done it before. My coach, had Olympic champions and a whole background of building teams for ice dance, and so I had a lot of people there to support me. And so yeah, the next 4 years my whole life was ice dance, and so we had 2 years at the junior level, 2 years at the senior level, which is the Olympic qualifying level, where, as you mentioned, we were fortunate. We medaled both years in junior and went to junior worlds. We were fourth at junior worlds our second year, and so we said, you know what, this is the time we should. We had more eligibility. We could have stayed junior, but we wanted to really, push forward and challenge ourselves, and that went great because we ended up immediately, getting assigned to senior level, Olympic level international events and representing Team USA there and placing fourth in the country at that level, which makes us an alternate to the world championships and all of that. And it was a really tough time, but a really exciting time. I got to see the world and learn so much about other cultures and the way that other people work and about my own work ethic and, what I loved and what I didn't love so much about the life training to skate. Um, and on the side, I was able to take little bits and pieces of uh, acting training through the school that I was going to at the time. I found a school that would work with my schedule as a skater, having to be out of the country multiple weeks to months out of the year. Um, and they were willing to work with that and met me where I was at and allowed me the opportunity to have an escape from the rink so that I could make friends and I could explore this new thing to me, which had been a hobby my whole life, acting and singing and all that. And now start to say, you know what, maybe this is something that whenever I'm done skating could be the next step. Um, and so, yeah, at the end of those 4 years, that was our Olympic cycle. We were supposed to continue and have two more Olympic cycles. I was supposed to still be skating right now. I was supposed to do the 2018 Olympic cycle, 2022 Olympic cycle, and the 2026 Olympic cycle. And I kind of realized, you know what? And it was a long, long thought out thing. It was not I woke up one morning. It's probably like 2.5 years, the
Yeah.
last 2 years that I was out there of my 4 year cycle. I was like, I'm really digging this acting thing. I'm feeling that every day I wake up, I am just waiting to get there. Um, and at the time I'm waking up at like 5:30 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, anywhere in between, so that I could go to the rink from, 6 to 12, and then I'm going to school from 1 to, and it takes an hour to drive from the rink to school from 1 to, 6, 7. And then if I had rehearsal, then rehearsal after that, that if they went late, I could be getting home around 1 o'clock, 1:30 in the morning. Cause again, I lived like halfway between the school and the rink. And so, yeah, and then I sleep 2 hours and go do it again. And so I'm exhausted, and yet I still find myself counting the seconds till I get to go be at school. Or, I mean, especially like the hardest time, like I said, was when I'm in a show because I have rehearsals after, I can't rest. And yet I am so excited for that. I am waiting until the season of the show comes up so that I can make myself more exhausted just because I wanted to be there that bad. And so, yeah, it became pretty clear to me that, this is my second time. The first time I had this transition was between singles and ice dance. And my decision was ice dance. This time I realized this is going to be a much harder decision because now it is taking what has been the last 14 years of my life, the sole focus, and kind of wiping the slate, starting fresh, going into something that from all uh, media and, you know, all all forms of media that talk about this and all the people I've ever spoken to about this say, yeah, acting is really, really hard. And it's entire, like, there's so much that's based on luck. And
Yeah.
yeah, you have to be talented, but like, you are completely out of control. And you just hope that something good happens.
Mhm.
And saying, you know what, I'm going to roll the dice on that and see what happens. And then, of course, you have to figure out, like, okay, now how do I do this in a way that is, you know, respectful to everyone involved, because I still am so thankful for everything that the coaches did for me. I'm thankful for my partner along the way, you know, and figuring out the way that I can do this in a way that is respectful and concise. So I'm not stringing anyone along, um, but also not sabotaging. And so, like, a big thing for me was And it was a tough decision, and you never know, every decision has pros and cons, but like I knew that I needed to hold in my emotions and not talk about it until the end of the season because I did not want to add the pressure and the weight onto our whole team, my partner and our coaches and everyone, that like this is a last hurrah, like this is the last thing. It's like I wanted us to get to have a totally free, like, of imposition, like free of all the weight of expectation. Just go out, skate our best, have our best competition we can, and leave it all on the table. And I knew that the best way for us to do that was to just hold in my emotions and make it like every other day, like every other competition, because that was what my sports psychologist had trained us. It's like a competition is every other day. It's every day of training along the way. And so, yeah, for better or for worse, for my own emotional well being, kept to myself. And we had a great last season. I'm so proud of our work that we did and the way that we came out. Um, and our last performances were some of my favorite performances because it felt, I get so worried about making sure that I can get out of my head and let the last thing just be free. And I felt like it was a beautiful chapter bookmark for me because I felt so free to just go out and skate and do. And then we figured out what the transition looked like. And a lot of people told me I was crazy. A lot of people had some not very nice things to say about my decision, in terms of it didn't make sense to people because I was supposed to stay in for another 8 years, and so it looks kind of crazy from the outside. And I can't blame them for that. But I knew in my heart and my brain that they were aligned. And when your heart and your brain are aligned, you should listen. And so I listened and I took this leap. And, after retiring with that Olympic season, I had a couple weeks to months left of that year of my school. I was a junior uh, in college at the time. And I finished up the school year and I was like, this is kind of incredible. I now feel so free to explore this new thing in front of me. And I went home for the summer, and it was my first time getting to go home for the summer in 4 years because my life had been training. Um, I hadn't had more than a couple of days off in a row in 4 years. And I go home, and a couple of people that I knew along the way from like doing musicals in high school, or actually, this was like my neighbor's aunt, random. My neighbor growing up, her aunt was a music director for a local equity theater. And just happenstance, I auditioned for um, I had gone in for like the open calls for the West Side Story movie. Uh, so I was singing Tony, and I was like, oh man, I get a call back for that. I'm like, wow, this is cool. Like I'm a junior in college, but I'm getting a call back for this. And oh, the casting director is inviting me to this other audition for a different show. That's cool. Maybe I should take a voice lesson and see what I can do. And I knew that this person who had been my neighbor, also mind you, I went to prom with this person, and the prom was at a theater. It was in like the convention center side of a theater, which will come back in a moment. I go out and I know that her aunt is a music director. And so I go and I ask if her aunt will give me a voice lesson. And I go in and we have a voice lesson. It was fantastic. Her name is Roberta Duchek. Everyone write that down. Again, we'll come back. And she says, you know, you really fit this show that I'm about to start the process of casting with this theater I'm working at. And it was Mamma Mia. And they said, you would be a great Sky. What you should come in and sing Sky and act the scenes and do the audition. And I was like, okay, cool. This is strange. I'm getting asked to come and audition for more things. Okay, great. And it was uh, such a cool opportunity. I mean, that's the thing is like when you're young and you get the opportunity to audition for things, there's no nerves. It's just excitement because this is what you love to do. And so I went in and I went through like 5 auditions for that. They kept bringing me back. First, I did like the initial round, and then there was like a callback, and then like a dance callback, and then another callback for Sky, where I was doing like the stuff with another actor. They were doing like reads, and eventually I ended up booking the show. And here's where that theater comes back that I had my prom at. It was at the theater I went to prom. And I end up covering Sky. I'm in the ensemble and I'm covering Sky. And who's covering Sophie? The girl I went to prom with at that same theater. And so it's just this funny, it all makes sense. And her aunt, whose name I mentioned, Roberta Ducek, goes on later on down the road. I end up doing a couple shows at that theater because it's like one led to another. She ends up she was the MD for Six. And so like she's done a bunch, she's still touring around, setting up all the different casts of Six across the country, the world. And she's just brilliant. And if anyone ever gets the opportunity to work with Roberta Ducek, please do. But yeah, so I start booking work and I say, well, summer is just about to come to an end. I've already got 2 shows that I've booked that are going to take me away from school this coming year. I guess I'm not going back to school. And so I didn't finish my undergrad. I started going to school. Um, and then from that point, I kind of knew I wanted more. I do a couple of shows. I've booked out like a year and a half of work in Chicago, and it's fantastic, and I love it, and I'm learning so much, learning so much. Anytime that you get to do a show, or wherever it might be, even if it's in your own room and you're just reading the script, it's an opportunity to explore and to discover and to learn. And so I was really fortunate that I was encouraged to look at things that way. And so I learned so much, but I knew I wanted more. And so I had my like pie in the sky was grad school at the London Academy of Music and Dramatic Art in London, uh, which accepts a very small number of people. Um, and so I didn't think it was going to happen. And it was entirely classical text. And I hadn't gotten to do that a lot. And I really wanted to learn how to be a classical actor. I wanted to learn the process and the dissection of text, the way that you can, take it apart and really, really analyze it. And I didn't think I was going to get in. So I auditioned for that. And I said, well, it went great, but I should probably keep booking out work here because I'm probably not going to get in. And so I, booked out another year of work. And then I find out I got in. And so at that point, I pick up, I drop these other contracts. I finish one that I have to leave a little bit early at Writers Theater in Illinois, in like north of Chicago there, which was a wonderful contract. I got to do Into the Woods, which is a beautiful show. But I pick up, I go to London, and I really just have kind of the world open up before me, both as an actor and as a person. I end up meeting my wife there. I learn what it is to be Alex. I learned so much about myself. Um, and on the side, I get to also learn all about classical text from some of the most incredible tutors in the business, people who have worked with some of the biggest names that have graced film and stage, in London. And, there are Americans who've gone through, and some people that I just really look up to. Like at the time, I really, really loved Sherlock, and I was watching a lot of Benedict Cumberbatch, and he had gone through the same program. It was how I found it. And he was the president of the school, is the president of the school. And so I just had all these beautiful serendipitous opportunities where I was in the right place at the right time to meet my wife, to do all this, to have the shows all work out, et cetera, et cetera. And I come home and we kind of figure out where we're setting up home base, end up in Chicago for a bit. And about 9 months after I get back from that is when I auditioned for a little show, a new one coming to Chicago called The Notebook. Um, and it was because of COVID. Uh, our showcase at the end of my program was delayed a year, and it was a 1 year program. So I was supposed to graduate in 2020. I did graduate in 2020, but it was the showcase was supposed to be fall of 2020. Ends up becoming fall of 21. In September of 21, I get called in for The Notebook. Actually, I think it was August. I get a self tape for it. I do my self tape. It's like 16 pages of material. It's a lot of material.
Thank you, Ingrid.
Thank you, Ingrid. I get to sing 4 songs and I do like 3 scenes, I think. And I went into it. It's like I knew The Notebook. I had seen the movie. It had been a while, but I had seen the movie. I'd never read the book. And I went in, I didn't know what it was going to be. You don't really know what to expect with a piece of existing IP like that. And I remember the first time that I listened to the music and I was like, whoa, we are cooking with gas. This is something here. The way that she was able to concisely, I always tell people she distilled emotion. It
1,000%.
was it was the way that we actually think as people. And I love Sondheim. I had just done Into the Woods like a year earlier, and Sondheim is such brilliant, witty, smart mental gymnastics almost that you get to go through as an actor to explore this crazy weaving line of thought. And that's brilliant. But I think people oftentimes forget that sometimes us real people, we think in minimalist ways. We think with our gut. And sometimes our gut is just, I really want to kiss you on the mouth. Oh, the mouth, the mouth, the mouth. Like, oh, we're just feeling these things. Um, and Ingrid just totally understood that. And for that piece and for the way that her vocabulary aligned with Becca Brunstetter, our book writer, it just created this piece that suddenly unfolded before me. And I was like, I have to do this show. I have to be a part of this. And I send out my self tape, and a month goes by, and I'm like, well, I didn't book it. I didn't do it. I enjoyed it, but I didn't book it. And then I get called in for a callback out of nowhere. I was like, oh, okay, great. I'll go in for this callback. It was on a Friday night at 8:30 p.m. I was second to last. The person who was last was Carson Stewart, who I didn't know at the time, and we both kind of saw each other like, hey, we're very different types, and we're in for the same role. I was in
Right, because you were
initially
in for young Noah
to
initially.
cover young Noah,
Yeah.
because they're only looking for covers at this time. Cover young Noah, Johnny Finn. Oh gosh, I think there was someone else in there that I'm blanking on right now. But I go in to cover that. Mind you, it's still pretty heavy COVID time, and so I'm masked up. And I get in the room, and I take off my mask, and I have a mustache.
Yeah.
And so I think they were all kind of like, "Who are you?" They definitely like the casting director. I actually think when I walked in, said someone else's name. They thought I was someone else. I take off my mustache. I'm like, "Oh no, I'm Alex." And they're like, "Oh, okay."
Did you have a
Um,
mustache when you taped for them?
I didn't.
That,
I
that,
didn't. I was clean shaven when I taped,
that's the, yeah.
and so I get in there and I have a mustache, and yeah, so like I was singing "Sadness and Joy," and I was
Oh my
singing,
God.
all
That's
those
that's weird
all
for
those
me to think
oldies.
about
Oh
you
yeah, yeah,
singing
yeah.
those.
"Sadness and Joy." I was singing. There was one called "Rivers Song," which didn't end up making the final cut. Um, but yeah, there were like 4 different songs I sang, and they were up there. Uh, yeah, "Sadness and Joy," and then I've got a secret too. I'm falling in love with you. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I was singing that one too.
very well. Yeah.
And yeah, I get in there, I have a mustache, and I think it was pretty clear that, and I was in there for like half an hour. And so I was like, okay, I'm probably not right for this, but I seem to be really vibing with these folks, and I got to kind of talk about my life and what had led me there, and the incredible person that I had just met and fallen in love with. And also, and I shouldn't say this, but this was a moment where I was very glad that I hadn't done the research that I should have done before I walked in the room, because I knew I had a list of everyone who's going to be in the room,
Right.
and I skimmed it and didn't pay attention to any of it. I was focusing in on the text, and so I get in there, and I'm a kid from Chicago. I know musicals, but I was not like well versed on every director and this and that. And so I'm auditioning, and Michael Greif is sitting right in front of me, and I'm talking with Michael, and I have no idea who he is. I thought
Alex!
I thought he worked at like Chicago Shakespeare. I wasn't sure, and there are 20 people in there, right? And
Right, right,
Ingrid
right.
was not there. Ingrid I would recognize because I had a playlist of like entirely Ingrid music when I was in seventh grade,
Yeah.
but Ingrid's not there, and so I'm chill. I don't realize that I've got Michael Greif, Shelley Williams, Becca Brenstetter, I've got Kurt Deutsch, I've got Kevin McCollum. All these huge, huge names in Broadway right in front of me. No idea, and it was great because I could just relax.
Well, there's
It wasn't.
that. Yeah.
It wasn't until okay. So I get home. It's like 9 o'clock. I get home and I get an email that they want me to come back in the next morning at 10 a.m. with like 7 new pages of material to do Middle Noah, the cover for Middle Noah.
Yeah.
I said, okay. I spend like an hour with my wife just cramming 7 pages, and I go in the next morning and I sing the material again, same music but new sides, and I sing the song. I'm like, okay, that felt pretty good. And at this point, I've realized who Michael is, and
Yeah.
it's only okay because I've already seen him the night before. If like a week had passed, I would be freaking out. But I was like in survival mode,
Right.
and so I sing the material. I'm like, okay, that went pretty well, cool. And then he turns, and like a lot of the time in auditions, they'll tape it, and it's just like for them to look at later. I don't realize that this is a live stream and Ingrid is watching me. And so he turns like, Ingrid, what did you think? And she starts speaking over like all the speakers in the room. And I just sang something that Ingrid wrote in front of her. Okay. And she was very sweet, and you know, it went great, but I was like, whoa. And I leave and I'm like, I think I booked that. And then you kind of enter the like, okay, like what's going to happen? And sometimes you wait with silence for weeks, months. With this one, I was lucky that their casting reached out to my agents within a couple of days and were like, he's going to get an offer. And then you wait for the offer to actually come in, and you don't know what it is. Um, and yeah, from that point, I was fortunate to be a part of the company in Chicago and see the piece grow and change and new things added and things taken away. The raucous country fair or raucous county fair, I should say, that was the initial setting of like when they meet, that has never seen the light of day and has become a joke amongst all of the Chicago cast, um, because that was completely changed, and that's where, um,
And the whole Ferris wheel thing too.
oh
Like,
yeah, oh yeah, yeah, all of that stuff gets changed.
but I liked it. I really loved the way it was. I thought it was
Well,
perfect.
and so what they did is they the initial basis of the script was on the novel versus the movie. And even beyond that, I think that Becca and Ingrid did a great job with the direction of Shelley and Michael, and with Jeff Coe and Carmel Dean helping along the way, building out a notebook that is incredibly unique to us. It's not the book, it's not the movie, it's the show. And I love the show. And I think that they found something absolutely gorgeous with it. Like I said, it's a distillation of the human experience, through these circumstances that some people deal with. Some people are fortunate to not have to deal with in their lives as they age, but some people do. And getting to share that show, you know, 8 times a week for a year was the greatest privilege. When eventually I found out you never know what's going to happen. You don't know if it's going to move to New York, and then you don't know if you're going to move with it to New York. And to have been able to move with it and continue covering Middle Noah as a role, which was incredible, and got to go on a bunch for that, and uh, to be the dance captain,
I was
and
just gonna say, like, you did everything on that show.
well, and like I was not the dance captain in Chicago.
Yeah.
Dorcas was, and she was brilliant at it, and I didn't know that that was even a possibility moving to New York, um, and Dorcas was so lovely and supportive of me doing that, and getting to learn, because it was the first time I'd ever dance captain a show, um, and that was scary and hard and kind of a weird thing to figure out, because I think we all watch shows and we can identify, oh, this has changed, or like, when you do it every day, you can see the changes, and the integrity of the show is important, but it's weird being, you know, a 27-year-old kid who is on his first Broadway contract. I feel so much imposter syndrome, and being like, okay, well, I guess I have to go and give a note to Marianne Plunkett, Tony Award winner, when I would give so much to have the talent that she has in her pinky finger, like one of the most unbelievably talented people I've ever seen, and sweet, and genuine, and a million beautiful things I could say about her. But on this given day, she was an inch out of her light, and so I had to tell her something like that, and it's just weird.
I mean, we
It
gotta
was
leave the
certainly,
light on in that show.
you got to leave the light on, yeah, yeah, yeah. But figuring out and learning through that, and taking on a little bit of that responsibility with that, and being able to help, you know, there were times when we brought in new people eventually, when Joy and Jordan and John moved on to their next contracts, and being able to be prepared to help them with their stuff, and taking really, really diligent notes. I had, gosh, in the end, I think it was like getting up to 70, no, more than that, probably like up to 100 pages of notes that dictated every single move and the number that because there are numbers on the stage that you don't really pay attention to once you start, like, doing the show a lot, but especially early on, learning the show, you have to know, like, okay, I'm going to walk at this exact lyric on this down, this beat in the song. I walk this, let's say it's like, you probably won't say like, I'll walk 7 steps, but you'll say, I'm going to walk with my left foot first so that I land on number 15 left, about 4 feet up from the rim of the stage, or like guide points of, like, it's going to be upstage right of the corner of the boat, or those kinds of little things. And it's got to be precise, because there are lights that are programmed to shoot at that specific spot, and if you're out of it, you're out of it. Or even more, there are pieces of set that will fly in, or come out of the ground, or come in from the sides, or come forward, that if you're in the wrong place, you get hit by, and that's bad. um, and so, yeah, getting that opportunity to be specific with that, and to take those notes, and then kind of the next step, which was growing brave enough to speak when I needed to, and to understand the order of communication with that, giving notes to people directly, or a lot of the time communicating with the stage manager so that they could be dispersed that way, and just figuring out what that looked like was, again, just a great opportunity that I'm very thankful for. And now, I get to think so fondly of that year and all the things I learned with that show. And I get to be even more excited now, as someone on the outside of it, as this new national tour is setting out, and getting to think about all the people who are going to get to have that experience for themselves now, which is cool, because the show gets to touch an entirely new group of people, except for Jerome. Jerome is playing father son.
Jerome!
let's go, let's go.
Oh, I know. I was so happy when I saw the casting. I was like, "Yay, Jerome, Broadway represent."
Yeah, 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 yeah,
So I've been wanting to ask you this question for a while now, and I'm really excited to do so. I mean, you did everything on that show. You did Johnny Finn, you did Middle Noah, you did Lon, you did Father Son, you were dance captain.
son.
You wore all the hats. But I need to ask, how did you feel about playing Middle Noah and Lon? And did they like approach the way that you like kind of portrayed both of them? Like, did stepping into one inform your understanding of the other? Because you were like on both sides of the story. So what was that like for you
Yeah,
as an
it
actor?
was an interesting thing. I mean, I think anytime you get to step into multiple shoes, it you can't help but let it kind of teach you about who you are and who those people can be and how they can grow in comparison to each other. If I'm being fully honest, I think a lot of the time I tried to not necessarily like if I was stepping into Lon, I'm not thinking about like who does Lon need to be opposite of Noah, right? I think it kind of it's built into the text. And so one of the cool opportunities for me as Lon is I got to explore Allie's perfect guy if there was no Noah. Because it's not Lon isn't a bad guy. In our version especially, Lon isn't a bad guy. Lon is a good guy. He's perfect for her if Noah wasn't there, you know? And so I just got to be supportive and concerned and care. Um, and it was a really beautiful role to get to do because you don't have a crazy amount of stuff, but you get to step in a couple of times and just be a good
Just be.
guy. Be you. Be a good person. Be supportive. Be excited for her, but also a little concerned and scared at moments when you see kind of the weird cracks forming where it's like, oh, I know you well enough that I can tell something is off, but simultaneously also not necessarily knowing well enough because there are things I don't know. But I don't know about Noah. They've never talked about Noah.
Mm.
And so it's like, this is all just her acting a little strange to me. Um, Getting to do Noah in the same way was kind of similar in that Noah can't be anyone but himself. He can try, and that's the whole thing is there's this, you know, sentiment of wanting so badly to be able to forget her, to be able to move on, but at the end of the day, she is the heartbeat in your chest, you know. She's the house, you know, and without her, you're just putting pieces in places. Um, but he's always trying to find this buoyance of like, I can move on, I can move on. I can't. Um, but yeah, the one moment in that track when you do kind of get to think about Lon, you know, he's talking about like, I saw you guys in the city. You know, you were laughing. You seemed like you're having, you know, you seemed happy. Um, but Noah again cares so deeply, and like he can be bitter, but ultimately he cares enough that he wants her to be happy. And so it's not necessarily going to change who he is, you know? And so, yeah, it was getting to do those opposite characters, opposite in quotations, uh, was kind of cool because, yes, they both want the same thing, but it's not like a competition thing where I felt like one was trying to tactically, you know, improve upon the other, you know, which I think is a bit of a rare opportunity because you could be these two comparative characters without one of them being a quote unquote villain, you know? Um, but yeah, it was really beautiful getting to kind of grow with the show and make discoveries along the way because there is so much there and so much of again what it is to be a human and to want and to hurt and to love. Um, but yeah,
And I think it was the coolest thing too to get to watch you put on all of these hats for your Broadway debut. Like you did everything and it was your debut. Like I'm just so blown away and inspired by all you did on that show. And speaking of that, can we do a quick little notebook rapid fire? Your favorite scene
yes,
Favorite song and favorite moment in the show. Scene, song, moment.
Ooh, I hit the wall. Is it okay? Quick question
Yeah,
before the rapid fire.
you got it.
The scene, song, moment. Are they mine that I was a part of, or
Could
just anything?
could be anything. I'm curious. I mean,
Okay.
I don't we've never talked about this before. I'm excited.
Scene. I really loved. This is one that is me. I loved getting to do the kitchen scene. The kitchen scene. There's so much going on, and it felt so like on its feet, and that
Plus we
was
like that brunch.
that's right. That's right. That's right. Well, and the brunch was great. The brunch was great, but I loved the kitchen when you get
Yeah.
to the two of them. There's this
Yeah. Yeah.
this bubbling in the air that you can feel, and they both want to say something, but they're scared and they're trying to feel out where the other person's at, and you have all these different things that you're trying to do because you're out there setting a table and cutting pie and putting pie on plate and putting fork and stuff, and it's all with the music, and so it's just it kind of just like moves. I loved that. I also loved the argument that they had on the bedroom in the
Oh,
bedroom later. It was fun.
I
And
miss
I
this.
guess I also loved the song after.
Yeah.
Uh, it's not easy. Love the dun 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 at the beginning hits hard. It's my wife's favorite part of the show.
It's so good.
Um, and I'd probably say that that is my favorite song moment that I got to do. Favorite song moment of the whole show is also the same as my favorite moment of the show. It was um, it was when we're going through the memory and I am still in here, and the two of them stand and sing together at the same time, and we kind of hit the cast hits this tableau because Marianne has been older.
Yeah.
Allie, for those who haven't seen it, there is a moment in the show where she is experiencing her own memory loss and has these glimpses of memories fading in and out of her view like a montage almost where she's walking through them and she can't quite catch them, and she walks across the stage and at the end of it suddenly they all just form this one big picture desperately trying to get her to remember, and the two younger alleys stand at the same time, and the music, like the harmonic structure of it and the the like the weight of the volume of it and the notes that they're singing and the emotional journey of what you've just seen and where it hits, that was the moment that like
Yeah.
my stomach drops and it like takes your breath away. um
That's my favorite moment in the show too.
that's my
So
favorite moment of the show without a doubt. It was so painful and beautiful and again human. You know, if you've ever watched someone who is experiencing that, it hurts so much to see them be confused by something that they know that they should know, and they swear that they do know, but it's just not quite there. And then the moment of lucidity, but it's fleeting, and you can't quite catch what it really means. And again, that was Katie Spellman, our choreographer, building this beautiful moment out of the unbelievable words and background that Becca and Ingrid had crafted, and Shelley and Michael, giving the audience that lens to see what she is seeing because she's downstage looking up. You are in her head at that moment, and it was gorgeous. And it was this wave of everything that like your body, like the frequency vibrates at the same level as what they are doing, and you it's the chills. But yeah, that would be my not quite rapid fire, but my favorite moment.
I know that like you can't like that show in a rapid fire. It's the most gorgeous, beautiful thing I think I've ever seen on a
Thank
stage.
you.
It's such a special show and it gave me the greatest people and I'm so grateful for that show and you wore literally all the hats in that show and I can't imagine what that must have been like for you. It must have been insane.
It was a tremendous whirlwind of a year. I'm so thankful to have had that opportunity. From Telsey and from Michael and Shelley, like I said, Ingrid, Becca, Katie, having Carmel and Jeff, every person in that show, I feel like we were all building something together, no matter. It was one of those beautiful because as a swing understudy dance captain, you don't know where you are in the power of it all. You don't know if you're going to walk in and you're going to be the other. You're going to be there's like the people who get to be on stage every night, and then the people who don't, and you don't know if there's going to be a divide there. And I feel so fortunate that there wasn't. We were truly like a family in that building across creative and performers. Um, I mean, the
Penthouse, I miss it.
the beautiful stories that I've heard, between cast members and the crew and with the orchestra. It's like everyone who came into there, I think, was just thrilled to get to make a beautiful piece of theater.
Oh, it was truly it was a life-changing piece.
I'm
And
glad I'm glad that we could be a part of that.
and I'm so excited to dive into this with you because you just completed your run as Tony in West Side Story.
Yes, indeed, I did. I did indeed. Yeah, that was a thrill. So I just had done Beautiful playing Jerry Goffin in Chicago,
Yeah.
which is a heavy role, and a lot going on there, and getting to do that and be on stage every night doing it and exploring that. And he hits high spots and low spots, but in very different ways than Mil was incredible. And while I was out there, I got this audition for Tony. Um, and this was also after I did a guest star on Chicago Fire, the TV show on
Yes.
NBC for all those who want to watch.
Oh
I
yeah.
won't
You
tell
were
you what
so good
happened,
in that.
but
You were
but
so good in that. Thank you, Shane.
thank you.
You were so good in that.
Sorry, Shane coming through. Don't trust Shane. Wait, do trust Shane. What? Who? Huh? Go
Oh
see
boy.
the show. But getting to do that and step back into the shoes as Jerry, and then at the end of that, so those are two very different roles. And then at the end of that, I get this audition to do Tony. And like, as I said, one of my first professional auditions was for the movie. And then, along the way, there were a couple times when I was like, oh, I was in, final round callbacks for it at various places. They've done it a couple times at the Lyric, and both times I was like, I was originally going to do one of those, and then I booked something else, and then the other one I was in like final rounds for, and it just didn't happen. And so I was like, you know what? Maybe I'm just not going to get to do Tony. It's kind of a classic role in the American theater zeitgeist, but maybe it's just not for me, um, which was a bummer because I think it's one of the truly, like, again, cornerstone, like groundbreaking shows in American musical theater history. Um, you've got some of these like greatest minds in the space coming together at very different points in their career to create something. Um, you know, Jerome Robbins, Leonard Bernstein, Martin Lawrence, and Stephen Sondheim, baby Stephen Sondheim. It's like, how does that happen in one place? And mind you, and then you got like Hal Prince and all those guys, and it almost doesn't happen. Like they were trying to get the show to happen. If you haven't, I won't go into it now because it'll take forever. But if anyone is listening who doesn't know about the history of West Side Story coming to existence, read that Wikipedia because it's fascinating. It was originally going to be East Side Story, and then there were all these things along the way that had to change for it to come into existence, and now it is one of the, you know, what would be considered by most to be one of the greats of musical theater. And so, yeah, I thought I wasn't going to get to do it. I thought I was like, maybe I'm gonna get too old and I won't be able to do it. I get the opportunity to do it, and I'm doing the original choreography, and I'm doing it with Linda Goodrich and with Kyle Kaufman, people who were mentored by and very close with Martin Lawrence and with Jerome Robbins, and have done this show before with the original stuff. They are wise people with this show, with shows in general, but with this show specifically. Um, and getting to do that with the original choreography and so much of the original intention transformed into theater in the round with 2,200 people. It was a wonderful space. Broadway at Music Circus in Sacramento, very cool. Um, Again, 2,200 seats in the round. It's crazy. It's awesome. But getting to do that show, you know, I love the classic text, that it originates from. Uh, for those who don't know, it is a retelling of Romeo and Juliet, with some choice changes along the way, uh, and through a very different lens. And getting to do that character in that show was both a terrifying challenge. I was so scared ahead of time. Every day I would wake up and I'd be like, I can't do this. I can't do it. But having the support staff with my wife and, just everyone around supporting me to push through. And especially because it was such a short window. I don't know if you know about the process at Broadway Sacramento, but you literally learn the show in like 7 days. And I was one of the only people in the cast who had never done West Side Story ever.
Oh,
And I was doing Tony. And so I'm like, okay, I've got 7 days to learn the show. And like, for a while, I didn't have the script. And I'm like, eventually, I need to ask for the script so that I can come in and know my material. And so, like, 4 days before I got there, I crammed the show on the page into my head without, you don't want to put too much preconceived, like, because you want to be directable. And so I'm trying not to like lock in too hard, but still get all the words and music in my head so that by the time I'm there, you
yeah.
hit the ground running. And yeah, in like 7 days, we had done the whole show.
And that show's
And
a beast.
it's a big show, especially, like doing Tony in that. Like, he does a lot of stuff, he sings a lot of songs. And there's a lot of like baggage that goes with it of like stuff that happens in the show, that you have to take into the next scene, specifically like the end of act one into act two, there's a lot going on. And for me, like, I don't really consider myself like a tenor. And so singing a great tenor role in history, I was scared. I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna be singing Maria, and I'm gonna be singing Something's Coming, and I'm gonna be singing, Tonight at the end, and I'm gonna be going up to the high note at the end, and like all. But also at the end of the show, there's a pretty big mental break that happens, and you gotta be screaming as loud and raucous and seemingly unprotected as I can, and so figuring out how to
Yeah.
do that,
And be vocally
and
healthy.
try and be as vocally healthy as possible.
Yeah.
And so I was drinking, I've figured out my way of doing it and how I can be healthy and still feel like I have the integrity of the character so that I am not, because nothing irks me more than like hearing a tenor who has to scream in a show, but they're clearly just like hitting a note and yelling. I'm like, no, that's not how people yell. Like, you get like there's gravelly stuff in your voice, and your voice breaks, and all this stuff, and figuring out how I could safely do that while still doing the show. And the cool thing about it is that it was a pretty short run, like I said, and so I probably, you know, wasn't as vocally healthy as I would want to be if I was doing it for a long, long time, but still working to find that and figuring out my own, you know, pedagogically, my process to achieving that, and drinking like a gallon and a half of water a day, and nebulizing saline solution when I can, and like all those little things that you can do short of, because I try not to take like prednisone or something. Like, I don't want to, you don't want to put stuff on that, because that's, I think a lot of, and for a lot of people, prednisone is great and it works for them, but you just got to be careful because like you can damage yourself doing that. And I will always try and avoid taking something if I can via water or a healthy process, or maybe trying to shift just so slightly so that like I'm still getting like the cracks in my voice without like trying to find literally like the specific spot where you can like throw a scream without it damaging, figuring that stuff out. But but yeah, it was brilliant getting to explore that. Um, and with so many people who've done such brilliant work with it in the past, Kanisha Feliciano and Yesenia and Waldy and Sean, who I had been next door to when he was in The Outsiders, and we never knew each other. And we grew up like 15 minutes from each other in Chicago. And
No
so it's
way.
like, it's these, crazy little happenstances, again, serendipity, where I'm like, we're buddies. Like, this is great. Like, I want to be friends with you because we should be friends. It's not like we're faking it for the show. Like, we should be friends. How were we not friends when we were next door to each other in the Schoenfeld and the Jacobs? Like, this is crazy. Uh, but yeah, it was a lovely opportunity, and it was hard work, but it was incredibly rewarding, and I learned so much. I think about my process and how to make a show happen that quick. Because like everybody, like you learn a show quick, and you know a lot of these regional contracts that I've done and stuff. Um, we got a little more time on Broadway because you're like figuring out what the show was. But if you're like when I did a chorus line, happy 50th.
I was just gonna say happy 50th of course
Happy
line.
50th, the chorus line. When I did a chorus line, you learn the show in like 2 weeks. And so like you learn a show quick, but 1 week, even though it's only 7 days, less than 2 weeks, feels a lot quicker than 2 weeks. So figuring that out, just learned a lot, and really fortunate to have had that opportunity.
Oh, that's incredible. So, of course, I have to ask, because you're on the inspiration show, who are some of your greatest inspirations throughout your career?
Greatest inspirations for me throughout my career. Well, that's kind of like a multifaceted thing because I've gotten to do so many different things, which is I'm again, very fortunate to have been able to do. Um, I would say when it came to skating, one of the people I really looked up to was Ben Augusto. He was like my favorite skater growing up. He was an ice dancer. Um, he was taking with the coach who I would inevitably end up with. And his storytelling on the ice was just brilliant. Brilliant. If I'm looking at my life as a whole, I would be hard pressed to pick between any of my immediate family. I'm very fortunate that my grandfathers, both of them, my dad, my mom, my brothers, my grandmothers, they they are all such exemplary people. Um, Now I get to expand that to my in-laws, my mother and father-in-law, my wife, my brother-in-law. I'm surrounded by so many incredible people, um, that it would be really hard pressed to pick who's like inspired me in that way. Um, but it would be my wife. Without her, I wouldn't be who I am. Um, she taught me. I always talk about it with the Notebook specifically, but like taught me how to be who I am. Showed me what it was to love, and you know how great life could be. Um, it's like you're going through the motions until you find your person, and so that's my biggest inspiration there. Well, that's probably that is my number one. But if I had to pick within specific like things, um, that I've done, that there's the skating. There's my wife, who's the real one, and then as an actor, that's a tough one. I'm very inspired by Marianne Plunkett for all the reasons I've already explained. The person that she is on stage and off stage, she's every day. It's like she's doing this unbelievable thing on stage. It's so hard. And yet she gets off the stage and has so much grace left in her body to share kindness with everyone who's just on stage and off stage. You know, she would walk through the line and be so kind and giving with people after doing this incredibly hard thing. Um, and she hates social outings. Like she is an introvert. Her favorite thing is not a party. Like, and yet she has so much grace in her to be kind and giving even when she is exhausted. And I really respect that. Not to mention the fact that that woman will make you feel things that you didn't think you could feel watching live theater.
So real. I'm a witness.
It's incredible. It's unbelievable. In terms of other actors, like I said, I really looked up to Benedict Cumberbatch. Um, he was, his work in like Sherlock was crazy. If you ever watched The Hollow Crown, crazy. Um, Andrew Scott, like so good. But yeah, there's a lot of people who inspire me. I think that the advice that I would give, which isn't really answering your question, is
I was
be in,
literally just, that's the last question. Looking back
be
on
inspired by everything. There's so much to inspire, and the world can be a really dark place if you let it, but it can also be a really bright place. And I think that's the challenge. And I struggle with it too. And if you're struggling with it right now, that's okay. Like, it's normal to feel ups and downs, and that's okay. And talk to people about it, but let yourself be inspired. You know, my cat is getting on my lap, and I'm inspired by the kindness that she is giving me right now. Say hi to the camera.
it.
This is
Hi,
Bread.
Fred.
Hi, Bread. Well, she doesn't
Long
want to be
time
on
no see
camera.
since your notebook takeover.
That's right. That's right. Um, but yeah, let yourself be inspired by the world around you. You know, spread kindness. Don't don't come to the world with sadness and anger. Come to it with joy and with um, the encouragement to spread peace. You know, to explore with other people. Like, we are so lucky to be here and to be alive when we and to have our computer shoved by our cats. Um, but like, there are so many. My life, as I've said, has been so serendipitous, and everything had to happen exactly when it did for me to be here. And I'm so thankful for every piece of that puzzle, even the things that at the time I didn't think were good. And so, be inspired, be joyful, be kind, and the world is a beautiful place.
Oh, Alex, thank you so much for joining me on
Thank you.
the show. You are like truly one of my favorite people and performers, and I'm in constant awe of your incredible talent and your journey. And you've had such a meaningful impact on my life and my theater journey, and it was such an honor to have you here. Thank you for
Well,
inspiring me.
thank you. The honor was mine, and thank you for using this, the opportunities that you have to spread inspiration, because that's also so important, and that is such a big part of that. So thank you.
You're the greatest.